It's my pleasure to introduce Glenn Telek, the Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of the Manitowoc Company. Glenn is a CPA and a graduate of the University of Wisconsin Business School. Glenn joined Manitowoc in 1991 as the Director of Accounting and became VP of Finance and Treasurer in 1998. In 2007, he was named the President and CEO. 2009, he was elected to serve as the Board Chairman as well. Well, I've just met Glenn for the first time this morning, had the opportunity to have a great conversation with him before the session. I've worked with the Manitowoc companies personally in my former life as well, working on health care plan development, and also the company I work for, Wausau Insurance, we administered the claims for the Manitowoc company for a number of years. So I had a working relationship with Tom Musial at Manitowoc, who's still there. So please welcome Glenn Telek.
Good morning, everyone. It's certainly my pleasure to be here, and I would thank Eric and Mary for having me. I'm the manufacturing guy here, and I guess I'm supposed to tell you that manufacturing is dying in the United States, but hopefully when I'm done at the end of this, you'll find out that that is a myth and not a fact, because we think manufacturing in the U.S. is a pretty good story. I probably won't tell you some things that you don't already know, but what I would try to show you at the end of this is, when they asked me to do this, it was about competing in north central Wisconsin. I'm not sure I can tell you what to do in north central Wisconsin, but I can tell you what we're doing in northeastern Wisconsin, and I think we're not that far apart. It's a 2.5-hour drive, and I think there's a lot of similarities. So I'll tell you what Manitowoc's doing, and I think if we can do it as a small, sleepy little company over in Manitowoc, I'm sure many of you can do it here in central Wisconsin. For those that don't know the Manitowoc Company, we have two segments. We have the crane segment and the food service segment. On the crane side of the business, we have obviously a global business, and we have three major product lines. One is the last boom crawler cranes with the Manitowoc brand. We have tower cranes, which maybe you see a little bit around on some of the construction jobs, but they're the T-top tower cranes. I think there was one downtown a while ago, maybe midsummer. And then on the mobile hydraulic cranes, it's the Grove brand, which I know we have some very good customers in this part of the state. So you see those on the wheeled cranes. On the food service side, we started out basically in the ice machines and the commercial refrigeration equipment. And in 2008, and you'll see the Manitowoc brand if you go to many of the finer hotels. We think they have to be the finer hotels. They will have the Manitowoc brand. But when we had that, and then in 2008, we did a large acquisition that got us into the hot side of the business. So basically, if you think of anything in a fast food restaurant, if you look behind the counter when it's fryers, grills, griddles, walk-in coolers, reach-in refrigerators, the prep tables, everything other than the ice cream machines and the coffee dispensers, it's what we serve. We try to be number one, number two, or number three in most of our markets. If we're not, we have to have a way to get to number one or number two. And if not, obviously that's a choice, as Mike talked about earlier. That's an allocation of capital. But in most of our businesses, we are global leaders, and on the food service side, certainly many of the markets strong global positions. So we started out in 1902 as a shipbuilder in Manitowoc. And as you can see as we went through, one of the big things in our history is engineering and aftermarket services. And I'll touch on the aftermarket services in a little bit. But you can see we got into the crane businesses right before the Depression. We got into the food service right after World War I. And as we got into the 60s, I mean, very, very good market positions in the United States, looking for ways to expand. Took the cranes into Europe in the 60s. But then in the early 90s, when I started with the company, I started in 1991. Basically, I was doing public accounting. That's where I had my public accounting. It was in Denver, Colorado. It was interesting, the story on Craig. I could have run for mayor in Craig. I spent so much time up there in my auditing days. And so what we did when I came to Manitowoc, the CEO basically said, we have the three segments. We either need to grow them or we want to sell them. And for me, as a 30-year-old kid, it was exciting. It was kind of a new management team. And so there were a lot of things we did, but one of them is we looked outside of the United States where we had, again, very good market shares and said, where can we do some other things? And so we've had an entree into China since 1994, and you can see some of the other things we've done since then. So our footprint today is over 100 manufacturing, service, and sales facilities in over 26 countries. And it doesn't mean, again, we're trying to move everything offshore. It's just the opposite. If you listened to what Mike said on why some people take things outside of the United States, we have very low volumes and it's highly engineered. And so that lends itself to where we can be closer to the customer in India, we can be closer to the customer in China, we can be closer to the customer in Brazil. Doesn't mean we want to build everything down there and bring it back to the U.S. We want it so we're closer to the customer so it reduces our costs. And basically for us, Manitowoc is a net exporter when it comes to products that we manufacture in the United States and ship outside of the U.S. So we're not bringing everything back into the U.S. as many people in Washington might lead you to believe. I don't know if anybody really knows what this means, and I'm not going to turn into speaking Chinese today, but if this symbol basically is the Chinese character for crisis. And what it means is the first symbol on the left is danger, and the other two symbols on the right are opportunity. And I think we show this to people to send a message that as we compete in a global economy, it is dangerous. I don't think not physically dangerous, but we do go through the crisis. There is danger. But the other opportunity, or the other great thing about it is there is opportunity there. So our challenge is, where do we go and what do we do and how do we do things that can minimize the danger and maximize that opportunity? And that's what we challenge our people with on a regular basis. And that's how we define where we want to go throughout the world. But one of the things that we do, I think if you do any strategic planning or business planning, we put together our SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And before we do that, though, we sat down this year in a little different level than we have in the past, and we said, where do you think the world is going in the next 10 years? I mean, it's kind of an open question. It's, you get some economists involved, you get engineering type people involved, you get innovative. Well, one of the things that we've done some research, and we had some people help us from the outside, we identified 10 global mega trends. And we broke them down into 3 categories as demography and wealth, climate, energy, and resources, and society and culture. And I don't know if you can see all of them, but what we said is, with Manitowoc, which ones really will impact us in the next, let's say, 5 to 7 years? They all will, don't get me wrong. But what do we do in the next near term, when I put near term in 5 to 7 years, which ones will impact us the most? And the ones that we looked at, and you look at on the far right, it's the shift of powers, it's the globalization, the lifestyle transformations, and then on the top left, the globalization of business. And you can see how we broke some of those down, and I'll get to the make versus buy later on. Again, is competing in the United States. That's a big one for us. If you think of what goes into our products as a manufacturer, we can't make everything. We would be very vertically integrated, and that can be very costly when I show you some of the sales numbers later on in a very cyclical business. So we talk about manufacturing. We have a lot of suppliers, and I've met one here in the room today, and somebody told me about another one that we have that does welding for us here in Tomahawk. So that's how some of the collaborations and partnerships we have. But you can see this is what we focused on, just sitting in a room just like we're doing today and kicking out ideas and coming up with where do we think the world is going in the next few years. So then we throw out what our vision is, and obviously this doesn't change much. But we want everybody grounded in what is a vision. It's really where you want to be. I don't want to mix up the strategy and the vision or mission or purpose. So we've defined the vision as where we want to be. The strategy, those are the choices that we're going to make on how we're going to get there. And so the 5 things that we identify in our strategy sessions, which we update every year, are where do we want to play? That means where do we want to be in the world? How are we going to get there? What capabilities do we want? And when I talk about capabilities, I really mean differentiating capabilities. You know, it's competing to win a global company or global economy. How do we win? You know, we can have a lot of the same characteristics our competitors do. We want to find those differentiating capabilities that will get us to that other level. And then what investments do we need to make? Is it acquisitions? You saw Aspirus, many of the things that they did. Some of it's new technologies. Is it in innovation? Is it partnerships, JVs? What's the cost of trying to do what we want to get to? And then when we talk about the evolution, that's just the monitoring of it. You know, things change. You just heard change management is critical. It's absolutely critical. And so what happens as things change and your plan doesn't go as expected? So we first talk about where we look at, we split up into our traditional markets and then the emerging markets. And if you think about it, you think of the traditional manufacturer in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, or Shady Grove, Pennsylvania, or you know, in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and many of the other places we have facilities. We have very good market shares in traditional markets. But the unfortunate thing is some of those markets are the ones that have the lowest growth. So how do we protect those markets and then identify, as I think Dick was talking about, being on, you know, thinking globally, act local, what in the emerging markets, what do they want? They may not want all the bells and whistles we have on some of our equipment. They want a very simplified product. So we have to break it down between the emerging markets and the traditional markets. So this is where that crisis and opportunity again comes in. The crisis right now is in the United States and Western Europe. The opportunity is in the emerging markets. And then in the hows, but I want to talk one more about the where. We also define what we call our sandbox. We call it a sandbox because that's where we say we want to play. And what that is it's lifting solutions and food service equipment solutions. And it's that simple. So anything that's in lifting, so we won't get into the dirt business, the Caterpillar type things, or food service solutions. How do you provide a solution, not just a product? And so we get into the how. We talk about the people, the processes, the technology, and I want to talk a little bit more on the partnerships because I think that's how in northeastern or central Wisconsin, that's how we compete, you know, better in this global market is getting those partnerships and collaborations. But the people is a big part of it. As a global business, the person that runs our crane side of the business, he's French, lives in Chicago. He tried to live in Manitowoc with his wife. She's half Vietnamese, half French. First of all, in Manitowoc, we have no French restaurants, and second of all, we have no Vietnamese restaurants. So you can understand culturally for somebody, and he moved from Shanghai, where he lived in the last 10 years, very difficult to get people to come to Manitowoc. But it's okay for me to manage this person from Chicago, yet he runs the whole crane business worldwide from that location. So it's being a little bit flexible as we're here in northeastern or central Wisconsin on the people. And you can see, obviously, on the processes, it's getting some consistent processes. Doesn't have to always be the same. That's not what we're looking for. But things like ethics and values, those things have no bound. I mean, they have no gray area. It's black or white. And whether we're doing business in India, or whether we're doing business here in Wisconsin, or we're doing business in Amsterdam, the values and the ethics are very important to us. And so you can see that this is the hows, and then I'll focus now a little bit on the staying with the how, on the stakeholders, and then we'll talk about some of the collaborations. It's not just our shareholders, our employees, and our customers. This is just a small subset of what we have to look at on a regular basis. But it's competing as a team effort. And all the people up here, I know deep in their hearts, they want, if they're partnered with Manitowoc, they want us to win. Because if we win, they win. And so it doesn't matter if it's our families where we live. Over the summer, we've had some tragedies with tornadoes and fires and floods. our people get together and send donations, do those kinds of things. It's really working as a team, and it was this is, you always kind of, in one of these presentations, you might say something that would offend somebody, and this could be that spot. I was I was interested when they asked me to speak at this, because it was talking about competing, and so many times, I talk about who we need to work with. The day after I said, yes, I would do this, my schedule was, some things changed, it cleared, it was good to go. Talked to Eric, and the next day in our local paper, in the Manitowoc paper, I saw something, and it's only a couple columns, but it says, GOP politicians banned from Labor Day parade. And I think most of you here in Marathon County know what I'm talking about. And I thought to myself, that's not it. That's not the collaboration we're looking for. And I think it's a sign for me that, well, Mike put something up that I wrote down. As I said, Mike, he talked about central Wisconsin being very cohesive. And my fear is some of that cohesion, and it's not just in central Wisconsin, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's all over Wisconsin, it's all over at the federal level. We're starting to get too far apart, and that possibilities of working together make it obviously difficult for everybody in central Wisconsin or northeastern Wisconsin to work together. So I just thought that was kind of ironic the day after we had, talked about doing this. But we talk about partnerships and collaboration. We can't do everything worldwide by ourselves. And so I'll give you some areas of where we do collaborate. And again, I think it's areas that whether we're in Green Bay or Parsons, Tennessee, or here in Wausau, innovation. We partner with the universities. We partner with our suppliers. We found ways to have them do some engineering for us. We can pay them for the engineering, but we can bring things to market quicker. We have a supply agreement that they build the entire crane for us in Japan, and we sell it and market it here in the United States, but we market it worldwide. But everybody knows it's built by the Japanese. It's very similar to their crane. But the reason they buy ours is because it's supported by Manitowoc. It's that aftermarket services. We have a JV in Thailand for walk-in refrigerators. We have a joint venture in Switzerland on some induction technology called Indux. So you can see where that happens on the innovation side. When it comes to the competition for talent, being on, as somebody called it this morning, the East Coast over in Manitowoc, we partner a lot with Lakeshore Technical College. When we were looking at trying to find welders, they implemented a 24-hour welding school for us. I mean, they were running classes 24 hours a day so we could get welders from the local communities. It's that kind of collaborations, those partnerships. That's what keeps us in the area that we're in, is to have those relationships. LTC had some students that we had the opportunity to send them to China and work with our people at our facilities in China for the summer. And so if we can, the comment was sometimes people graduate from these schools in Wisconsin and want to go elsewhere. I completely agree with that. I have two daughters that are at the University of Wisconsin right now. Do they want to come back to Manitowoc? Didn't ask them, but I think I have a pretty good feeling. But that's the challenge we have. We have to find ways that we can get it exciting for them to give them opportunities, whether it's in Manitowoc or worldwide, but it is with Manitowoc nonetheless. So you can see from our perspective, partnerships, collaborations, working together, it's vital for us to remain, with our headquarters in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. So we talk about, I mentioned the capabilities, again, as we go down that list of how are we going to compete. We have to have the right differentiating capabilities. And so we've identified 7 strategic imperatives that everything we do has to fit into one of these baskets. And obviously growth, that as a publicly held entity, that's obviously very important for us, but it's not growth at any cost. Innovation. Probably, as I mentioned earlier, innovation, that's a bloodline of our company, has been around since 1902 at the start of our business. But the one I want to look at is the aftermarket focus, because we talk about the people want to be in these technology or the services area. This is a service area. It's funny, you call it telehealth. We have a little piece of equipment that goes on every crane using telematics, and basically it gives us the health of every crane that is out there working around the world. Every crane that we have built since 2000, maybe early last year, has this telematics. We can pull it up on the screen. We can see what it's lifting. Is it working? Is it turned on? I mean, and our customers are using that just like the telehealth to find out, does it need oil? What's the wear on the tires? Are people overlifting? Are they using it past the capacities? That obviously from an engineering standpoint isn't a good idea. So in the services side, I was talking to somebody earlier, we try to get some of the younger kids into this side of the business because it's dealing with a lot with software engineering. It's dealing a lot with mechanics, and they get to travel the world. I mean, they get to go where sometimes you don't want to be where some of these cranes are, but they do get the opportunity to travel through all of our service centers, which we call Crane Care, kind of a takeoff of the the GM product. I forget what the name was. Not Crane Star. OnStar. Yeah, that's it. So we kind of that same kind of concept where we have service centers and we also have call centers throughout the world. We had 7 call centers, 2 in the U.S., 2 in Europe, 2 in China, and 1 in Singapore. That anywhere that obviously people are operating a crane, the phone call comes in during the day when they're manned. And if they're not, if somebody's working at night and there's nobody at that call center, it'll go to another country. But in those call centers, which we have spread throughout the world, we speak 8 or 9 different languages. So as a customer that doesn't go through distribution, they can call those and they can troubleshoot these items. And now with the Crane Star, everybody has a much better sense of what the problem is. So these imperatives are basically defining what differentiating capabilities we will move forward with as we try to compete in a global economy. And then basically the question that we all have to ask is, what is it going to cost? You know, what investments do we make? Where do we make them? Mike talked about allocation of capital. Well, after we did the acquisition of Inotis, we have $2 billion of debt. We can't do everything we want. There have to be priorities. And on the growth side, we're doing things like we're building a new plant in Brazil. We have other facilities in Slovakia and China, Russia. It's really where do we see things that are going to grow that give us the best return on our capital. Innovation, different programs that we have there. The people in the organization. This is one that if we talked about 2 things where we need to go from where we are today to where we want to get, it's going to be about people and emerging markets. That's going to be what's going to change us over the next 5 to 7 years. And so obviously the value creation, to me, while we talk about it and it's unbelievably important to us and we focus on the bottom line, that's really a byproduct of everything that happens in the other imperatives. But then we have to manage this strategy, these plans, and this is kind of, it's one of my favorites because it really shows how the real process works throughout Manitowoc. But you can see on the top left we have our vision, and then we go to the corporate planning, which turns into the segment planning. And that's what we do. We do it every year, but we don't always change the perspective. You know, for 2 years it may be 2015. Next year we'll change that to 2017. And we'll come up with different ideas, or we'll come up with maybe new technologies, whatever may have changed. But it's not great shifts in strategy. It's just defining where we, again, if that's still the same vision, what strategies are we going to use to get there? But then we do our annual planning when it gets over to the right-hand side after it's been approved by the board. And unfortunately, things don't always go the way we plan them. So this is where, to what Dwayne was talking about, that's where the accountability comes in. We take the business units, the business performances on the bottom side, and that's every quarter. Strategic planning, the top part is annually. There's a refocus. Did you do what you said we were going to do? Are things looking the way you thought they were going to be? And so there's a constant evolution of what we're looking at as to, in one of our big mantras, one of mine is basically do what you said you were going to do. And so that's how we focus on this area. And sometimes you get in the crisis, this takes a little more effort than what it has in the past. When things are going well, from our perspective as a corporate office, if you're doing what we said you were going to do, you're not going to see us very much. If you miss your targets, you're not being held accountable, that's when we're here from corporate and we're going to help you. That's unfortunate what happens, but it does happen. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, well, you called somebody, is something wrong? I mean, they answered their own question. So anyway, this is really how we manage the business at a very top level, and it's a process that everybody knows about, and again, one of those consistent processes. Doesn't matter if we're in Chile, Argentina, or Poland. It's the same process. So what's evolved out of all of this? If you really look at what our strategy was to do, it was to lessen the impact of the cycles that we go through in the construction equipment business. You can see in the red bars on top, and this is sales, is the cranes. In the trough we had in 2003, I think they're going to quit giving me new positions because I took over in 2002, 2003 was the trough, took over as chairman in 2009, 2010 was the trough. So I have only a few other places to go. But you can see what the real strategy was is how do we minimize the impact on the organization to the cycles in cranes, and that was to grow the food service area. So you can see here, from a trough to trough, we've increased our sales in cranes by about 135%, and the food service revenues are about $1 billion better. Again, that's through acquisition, but it was a way that we could get a global product line, get better manufacturing on a worldwide basis, and get better distribution. So you can see what that's done, and even better, and right there in the previous slide, last year, cranes was 65% of the revenues. It's only 35% of the profits. So food service being the smaller piece of the revenue pie, the larger piece of the profit pie. And so you can see this is really what we're trying to get through. If you go back to 2003, you can see operating earnings of only $78 million. Last year in 2010, again, assuming that is the trough of our business, upwards of almost $300 million of operating earnings, trying to get that cyclicality out of the crane business. And at the same time, we divested of the marine business that we had in 2008. So that's really what we're trying to do. And 2003 was the first time we were ever profitable in a downturn in the crane side. And so then you can see then the next strategy was in the next downturn, how are our margins bigger in the next downturn? And you can see it was at 5.1% in 2010 versus 3.5% in 2003. So those things are working, and a lot of it is because, again, protecting our traditional markets, but investing in some of the emerging markets and putting fixed cost into some areas that we thought had bigger growth areas. The last thing I wanted to just briefly touch on is this doesn't happen without leadership, and I thought Aspirus had great slides on change management. It is unbelievably difficult, especially when you start talking all the different languages, how things mean things differently. We have just meetings to talk about what's the definition of something and is everybody aligned. And we're not always aligned. I may say something, what I think can be translated very simply takes on a whole new meaning. So leadership is a big part of this, and it all comes down to us competing in this global economy. I mean, there's a huge opportunity for Manitowoc out there, and whether we're building a new facility in Brazil or downsizing a facility in France, which the social laws in France make it very difficult to do that, it takes strong leadership, and it takes global leadership. And so that's a big part of what we spend a lot of our time on. And the last thing I would say is, and this goes right into the change management, we use this slide a lot when people start telling us all the reasons things can't happen. We call it our caveman slide. And basically what caveman means, it's our citizens against virtually everything. And And what that does is, you know, it gets down to that. It's the what did Dwayne have on the last piece? When everybody buys in, you get the inspirational thoughts. That's where you want people. You want them in the inspiration side. This is where everybody starts off. This is where everybody wants to be. You can't do it. I've been here 15 years. We've done it before. It's really getting past that. And so these are the ones, these are the people that will derail your organization. It's that simple. And we have another saying that we have in our organization. I'll use the politically correct way of the way we say it. It's called the FIFO method, which is either fit in or fly out. And you can use the FO for whatever you want in some other areas. But really, that's kind of, you know, how sometimes it gets to the point where these strategies, if you buy in on the strategy, you have to buy in on the implementation. And that's where change is very difficult. But that's what leadership is all about. And as we said, it's not our, you know, you want people to be happy, but you're not going to make everybody happy. And you have to find those people that you can get in the right seats on the right bus in the right job. So that's basically what I had to say today, and I want to thank you for your time. But I would say, you know, if you're going to expand, if we want to compete globally, first of all, we have to have the desire. And I think just having this conference here today, I think shows there's a desire on how we compete from central Wisconsin and in northeastern Wisconsin to a more global basis. I would say put the strategies in place. These things don't happen by accident. It does take some preparation, some planning. And lastly, you have to have the right people and the right leadership. So appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your day.